And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ask the Theologian. I'm Dr. Randy White, and this is Wednesday, isn't it? You know what that means. It means we take your biblical, theological, and worldview questions, and that we come back tonight and study the Gospel of John. We're in our 13th session of the Gospel of John. We are in the third chapter of the Gospel of John, and starting about verse 5. We were off last week due to our online revival. Back tonight, 6 p.m. Hope you'll join us for that, and ready to take your questions today. Always excited to do so. And let's start with Keith's question. As Keith says, getting all my computer here set up like I'm supposed to have. Keith says, his question is there any real evidence that Paul traveled to Spain? The answer is going to be no, in terms of real evidence. Let's see, Romans chapter 15, verse 24, it says, "Whensoever I take my journey to Spain, I will come to you. For I trust to see you in my journey and to be brought on my way thitherward by you." Thitherward. Isn't that a good word? Thitherward. "Whensoever I go thitherward, if first I be somewhat filled with your company." So he desired to go, let's see, who is he speaking to? To the Romans. And on his way to Spain, he would stop by Rome. We don't know if it ever happened. Let's see if Bullinger has a historical note on it. Again, that's Romans chapter 15, verse 24. And he does not have a note there. And we could do some research, and what we would find is that there are some who would take things, for example, there's a couple of scriptures which talk about the gospel going to the whole world. And you know how that conversation goes. They're talking about what part of the whole world. Are they talking about the Philippines and Papua New Guinea and the Amazon? Or are they talking about the inhabited earth, as often the term was used? But that would certainly include Spain. The issue there is that those scriptures tell us that the gospel went there. They do not necessarily tell us that Paul went there. And clearly, the gospel went beyond the boundaries of Paul's journeys. So the gospel got to Spain. Did Paul ever journey to Spain? I think that probably if you were to study some of the historians, some of the early historians like maybe a Eusebius, who has very interesting church history, but not necessarily always terribly accurate. It's worthy of reading, Eusebius, by the way, and some of the other early historians. They're worthy of reading. You just do have to discount some of it, whether it's to their lack of knowledge and they wrote what they knew, or they were mistaken, or their standards of journalism were more like modern standards, and therefore there was some fake news in there. Hard telling exactly what that is. But real evidence that he traveled to Spain, no, this is the only reference to Spain in all of the Bible. It's also down in verse 28 here. Let's see. "When therefore I have performed this and have sealed to them this fruit, I will come by you to Spain." So once again, his intent was to get to Spain. Now, he could have got to Spain. When you study the imprisonment of Paul and the death of Paul, the challenge is we don't really know. Did he end up in the Roman prison? In prison at Caesarea, and then goes to Rome, and certainly he writes some from Rome. Did he ever get released? That's what we do not know. Everything even that we know about Paul's death is by tradition. And so when you add in tradition about Spain. There are some say he was released, he went to Spain. There are some say he made it to Spain at other times. There are some say he never made it to Spain. Truth is, I don't know. I imagine if you talk to the Spaniards, they will claim that he made it to Spain. And certainly the gospel made it to Spain. But in history, anyway, it was more of the Peter's gospel that was carried out. But that was true in Rome, too, the Roman Catholic Church, of course. Any real evidence he traveled to Spain, I am going to have to give that a no. And let's do some speculation to see. And I would be welcome, by the way, if there's a listener out there who has some information that you think is viable. I would love to look at that because even as yesterday in that blog article I wrote on the naked man in the Garden of Gethsemane, and as I've said so many times, I think that we really do need to stop and study issues like this that obviously that's not going to affect anyone's salvation. It's curiosity for the sake of history. And I think curiosity for the sake of history or for the sake of knowledge or for the sake of developing a theology, I think it's all good. I've been studying the Gospel of John this morning and have had, as you'll see tonight at 6 p.m. in our John broadcast, I've had a little bit of speculation there because some things we just don't fully know exactly what that is talking about. But inquiring minds want to know, right? That's where we come, and we certainly want to know that. Let's go to Michael in South Carolina, who had a question that actually came in yesterday. Sorry that I missed that. It's North Carolina, isn't it? Let's see here. Yeah, South Carolina. I was right there. Okay. If all things were created in 6 days and all was very good, when did God create Sheol, the abyss, and the lake of fire? Once again, somebody's had their thinking cap on here. And let's start out by the lake of fire here. The first and only reference is going to be in Revelation chapter 19 and then into chapter 20, 19 and 20. We see it, I believe the first reference, if I'm not mistaken, is chapter 19, verse 20. These were both cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. And that later comes up, let's see here, in the end of the millennium, we will have once again, here we go. Revelation chapter 20, verse 10, the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone where the beast and false prophets are and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. Now, one of the things we can see from that passage is that nobody is there today. The lake of fire is empty, is waiting. Now, there is a passage that talks about, I believe, the lake of fire being prepared for the devil and his angels. And let me see here if I can find that. I may be... going by memory here. Revelation chapter 20, verse 10. Let's check this out because I think that's where it was. Yeah. Somewhere, and if someone sees this, help me out. I am thinking that there is a passage that talks about the lake of fire was prepared for the devil and his angels, but that may just be terminology that we have begun to use, and that shouldn't belong there. So from that, then, I think that the question then is, when were all these good? I agree with you that we have to. I agree with, I think, what is the implication of the question, and that is that at the sixth day, there could not have been a lake of fire. There could not have been an abyss. The abyss does exist, inhabited today. There are those certain angels that are in the abyss. I think that comes from the time of Noah, that they've been in it anyway. Now, when was it created? Well, been in it since the time of Noah. And then Sheol, of course, is, let's just take that as the grave. And with Sheol as the grave, then I think it would be fairly easy to build a logical argument based upon the assumption that everything was very good and there was no death, no sin or death. Romans chapter 5, verse 12 would support that. There is no sin or death on the sixth day. Therefore, it was somewhere later that sin and death came. Now, if death did not exist prior to the sixth day, then there is no need for the place of death. In fact, it would almost be beyond definition to have a place of something that does not exist. So, like saying right here, I'm going to put my hubba jabooba. You can put your hubba jabooba wherever you want, because there's no such thing as a hubba jabooba. So you can't really have that place for it until it exists. So I think probably with the curse would be my best guess. Again, is there anything that we could see? I don't think so, that we could find in the scripture that would talk about Sheol having not either an eternal existence or having, that is eternity past, or even having an existence with the beginning of creation. Now, maybe you could talk in Sheol, you could talk about the deep and the waters of the deep, which were then emptied out. But by the time you get to Noah, you've certainly had death. Not a lot of death, maybe. I think because of the ages that were lived there, that Noah and, Methuselah, who died the year of the flood, and Adam, they overlap. So in that time period, there's not a huge amount of death, but there is some. So you can't have it be the waters of the deep emptying up, and that becomes the place of Sheol. And then the further question is Sheol is there a physical place of Sheol? It's referenced many times as in the earth. But is it a physical place in inner earth that is the place where the spirits dwell? Do you have to have a physical place for spirits to dwell? It may be that God created a spiritual place outside of this realm beyond that, and yet the abyss certainly looks to be in the earth. But again, that comes with Noah. And so that could have been when that broke out, when the waters of the deep broke forth, that abyss that was created, that bottomless pit that was created, he put the Nephilim in there at that time. So again, everything you have is going to be speculation. The lake of fire possibly doesn't even exist today. It's not going to be used into the future. It certainly exists by the time you get to Revelation chapter 19 and 20, but that doesn't mean that it can't be created between now and then in the tribulation, in all the remodeling of the universe that takes place with the tribulation, with the stars falling. Does that somehow, I'm not a scientist or an astronomer on this, but does the stars falling, the stars being shaken, like fruit on a tree, does that create a void which burns, which becomes the lake of fire? I think you can make a pretty good case to add all of those in later, the abyss and the lake of fire, and Sheol as the place of the departed spirits. I think you can put in there and bring that. Now, this is one of the reasons, by the way, that I reject the gap theory. I've got some good friends who hold to the gap theory, like Schofield, for example. and Clarence Larkin, both very good dispensationalists, very good thinkers, very smart individuals who hold to the gap theory. I can't get over, and I haven't found anything that they have given me to help me get over. Even our friend James Morris has done some good work on this. It's not published, but he can carry on a very good conversation as it relates to this. So, but I can't get over this. It was very good on the sixth day. If the devil had already made chaos of the world and what we have as a recreation, but the devil's still sneaking through there like a Nancy Pelosi. I can't quite put all that together in my mind. And therefore, even though they've got a decently logical assumption and a textually driven argument, that's the one I can't get over. So, and I don't think that you have to take the earth was formless and void. You don't have to take that as the earth didn't used to be formless and void, but then it became formless and void. The word is become, that the earth became formless and void, but it became that way because that's what way he made it. You can certainly interpret it that way. So that way that I interpret it then would go along with the assumption of your question that Sheol, the abyss, lake of fire, even Satan could not have existed on the sixth day. That had to have taken place after the creation of Satan had to have taken place after the sixth day, and then Sheol, abyss, and lake of fire, I think, took place after sin entered in the world, and then you have sin and death, and when you have sin and death, then you need a place for sin and death. Thank you, Michael, for the question, and it is, Michael, see, this is why I was confused. I knew I was confused. I knew it was North Carolina, and South Carolina, a little bit of travel back and forth. And an added comment that Michael gives, I also realize that Sheol is divided into two main sections, the place of comfort and the place of torment. It could be, but I don't even think you can have the place of comfort existing on the sixth day, because it is a place for death, and death did not come until sin. So would you have a place for death when there was no such thing as death? That seems illogical to me. And furthermore, seems that death was in the recipe. And if death was in the recipe, then it was not very good. This is the Calvinist problem. Oh, yes, it's all very good. It's very good, and I am going to, it's all very good because they're going to die and go to hell. This is what's in the recipe. Oh, that's very good. Yeah. That's the kind of Frankenstein God you get when you say it's very good and I have planned to send many of them into eternal hell. So I don't even think you can have the place of death that is there. Thank you very much for that. And Michael from Pfafftown, North Carolina, Fort Mill, South Carolina. Are you allowed to travel? One of the Carolinas I read, which one was it? That one of the Carolinas has been fairly open with allowing people to go about and carry on their lives. If that is that true? Am I dreaming things that there was a paradise in the Carolinas where you could actually still go and do something? Could it be? I don't know. But as Charles said, check your bank account. Lots of people got money today. So it's all good, right? We're all happy today. I can tell you that if the liquor stores are open, they're going to do a good business today. Not from our audience so much, but, I've seen how this works in the past. When there's some free government money, the liquor stores probably will do better than anybody else. And they've already, I understand, been doing pretty well uh, in this time, because I guess there's nothing to do but stay home and drink, or listen to Ask the Theologian and all of the broadcasting that we do, which is a better plan. But yeah, a lot of money gone out into bank accounts today. I've heard from several people said they got their bank account money there given as a free gift of the government. That is, we'll take away all your liberties and we'll take away your ability to make an income, and we'll send you $1,200. Send us a thank you note, right? I don't know. You know, there's one side of me on this that does say I would rather they send me and you the money than send it, say, I don't know, to the Kennedy Center and to all of the gajillion things they send it to more than us. I believe the second stimulus package was, if I understand right, it comes out to $6,000 plus some change for every man, woman, and child in the United States. That, you know, 2 trillion or 6 trillion or whatever it was that the House and Senate passed and the president signed into law, something like $6,000 per individual. Now that means you and your spouse, instead of getting $2,400 in your bank account today, should have got like $12,000 in your bank account. And if you had a child, $6,000 for them too. Let's make it $18,000. That might get into where we had the loss. And that, I personally think that would have the better effect on the stimulus of the economy. People would get out of debt. Well, if they just get out of debt, then they have more money to spend, and they're going to be spending it on cars and houses and furniture and all of the things that they want, medical bills, you know, all those things that they want. So I think that I don't like the whole thing. The government created the whole thing. They've got to somehow stimulate the economy to get it out. Probably they should have just sent every man, woman, and child all the money, because you and I and we can handle it much better than the Kennedy Center or you know, all of the various things that take place. So looks like I'm going to back up just a little bit here on some of these comments, and then I'll back up and get the other ones here. And PNC mobile app is down due to too many people trying to check for their checks. You know, I'm not sure. PNC obviously is a bank. Somebody else told me the same thing about Capital One. And obviously that's a big bank. And so I told them to get a real bank. But I kind of prefer a local bank myself, where you can go in and they say, "Hi, Randy, how are you?" And you know, they give you a bag of popcorn and a cookie. This was in the olden days when you could actually see a person. But that's the way a bank should be. I kind of like that personally. I think everybody should have a relationship with a banker. But nonetheless, so that's interesting that that's 2 banks now I've heard of that their apps are down because there's just so many people trying to, you know, cha-ching! I think I got money. I got to get in there and check it. So let's see. South Dakota has been open. Very few deaths. Governor Noen, did I pronounce that right, has taken vicious attacks on the MSN. I'm sure that is true. You know, some of these places, especially, all the Democrats are calling for a national strategy. We got to have a national strategy, a national strategy. Well, South Dakota is a whole bunch different than even Seattle or definitely New York City. and South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, much of Idaho, even getting down into more of the plain states, Nebraska, Kansas. These are places, I would, for that matter, include New Mexico, Nevada. These are places that you just don't have big populations of people. You take all of Wyoming, and what's the population of Wyoming? $750,000? I don't know. We'll check it out. Did I say dollars? I meant people there. Population, 10th largest by size, least populous, sparsely populated. Let's see. Yeah, I just want to know the population. On Wyoming, and no, I don't want to donate. Isn't that interesting? They pop up the donate thing because you got money. And that was Wikipedia, by the way. So population, 578,000 people. So that is, I think that's about the size of Albuquerque. And that's 6 people, just under 6 people per square mile. Now, do you think Wyoming, with 6 people per square mile, needs to have this lockdown policy? Utterly ridiculous. South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, all of these other places that have this. I very much think there has to be a local strategy that's given, and then problem is there are very few sane governors out there that make such a strategy. Michael says, I'm a technician with American Airlines, and therefore, for the first time in my life, I am essential. Although my wife says I've always been essential. That's nice that she says that. I travel from Pfafftown, where I live, but maintain travel trailer in Fort Mill, so I don't have to travel as far during my work week. So you're essential. You get to do whatever you want, right? Okay, let's get back into the questions now that all of you have gone to your bank account to see if you got your $1,200. From Scott, is there any way God has used the perversion of the gospel by the Roman Catholic Church to his purposes? Can we question likewise with the partial and crippled Reformation? Okay, let's talk about these two things. Excellent question. The Roman Catholic Church obviously has a perverted gospel and has spread around the world. Let's talk about the Reformation after that. Is there any way God has used that for his purposes? Let me talk about my part of the world right here. The Spaniards came on expeditions beginning about 1509. So let's call it 500 years ago. The Spaniards came here. The Native Americans were here before that, right here in Taos. The Taos Pueblo Indians have lived here 1,000 years. There is a UNESCO World Heritage Site right here in Taos, which is the Taos Pueblo. It is the oldest apartment building in the world. For 1,000 years, they have been living there. They live there to this day. Look up Taos Pueblo. You can find out about it. They had their Native American religions. And that was true, of course, of most of the North American Indians. Now, in New Mexico, the Spaniards came in, and the Spaniards came in for 2 purposes. One was to find gold in the New World. They were looking for the lost cities of gold. So that was obviously what fueled much of it is cha-ching, we want the money. They didn't find it and hadn't found it since. But it was such a beautiful place, a lot of them decided to stay. And they named it Nuevo Mexico, by the way. Do you know, I'll get into a little history here. Do you know it was named Nuevo Mexico 200 years before there was a country named Mexico. New Mexico actually was named prior to the country of Mexico. Look it up. It's an interesting story. But it was named after an Aztec city. Was it a real Aztec city or a fabled Aztec city? It might have been a fabled Aztec city. And so, this is, we got the Mexico, this is the Nuevo Mexico. And that was a little bit of history. Now, they came not only for gold, but the second reason was they came as missionaries. And they came as missionaries of the crown, which, of course, was church, state all together. And so they brought the Roman Catholic religion. They, in bringing the Roman Catholic religion in their missionary expedition, I have at times called it the most effective missionary expedition that ever has taken place in the history of the world right here in northern New Mexico. Why? Because they took a group of people that were involved in Spiritist ancestor worship, and they converted them to Catholicism. They converted them to Catholicism in such a way that only now, in the last 500 years, only in these recent, I'll say 25 years, are the Native Americans starting to leave Roman Catholicism and go back into their Native American religion. For example, the Pueblo, just down south of here, Pueblo is a community of Pueblo Indians. It for years and years and years was named San Juan, St. John, of course. And that came from the Spaniards who came, converted them to Catholicism, and they took, as so many of these, Taos did not, but so many of these Pueblos took the Catholic names, San Juan, Santa Clara, San Ildefonso. They almost all have this San in there. Saint somebody is what they were named after. And those Native Americans really did seriously adopt Catholicism. Now, Catholicism has always allowed syncretism, so it was its own brand of Catholicism, but nonetheless, it was Catholicism and Jesus on the cross and his death, burial, and resurrection and all these kind of things that they knew about. Now, what I wanted to say about San Juan, the San Juan Pueblo, I don't know, 20 years ago maybe, it, maybe not even that long, it changed its name. It got rid of the San Juan. It's going back to its native ways, and it's called Oke-Awinge today, rather than San Juan. You can tell Oke-Awinge sounds a lot more native, doesn't it, than San Juan. Now, the whole purpose of that history is to say, the question is there any way that God has used the perversion of the gospel by the Roman Catholic Church for his purposes? Well, I can say that the good thing is that among Native Americans here or among the Spaniards here in New Mexico, people very much do know about, and I would even say respect, the cross and Jesus Christ. His work here is known. Now, it is not it is not well received. It is not it is not rightly divided by any means. And we don't need to go into all the perversions of Catholicism. I was looking for a picture that I took just a couple of weeks ago to show you the prevalence of the Catholicism here. And again, can I say good that was done? Here we go. I took this picture in our grocery store, and it's Pepsi. And you can see that the Pepsi distributor came and felt at liberty to take the Pepsi bottles and to put them in the form of a cross. And you put the little cloth over the other ones, and you can buy something there for $35. I'm hoping that's not Pepsi. You see, it's probably those little icons that are down at the bottom. There's the Virgin Mary on the left, and it looks like Jesus on the right. Now, this is the grocery store. This is local. This is in Taos, which is, its reputation would be New Age atheistic. And that is its reputation, but that's the white hippies. The Native Americans and the Hispanics, the Spaniards, they don't want you to call them Mexicans because they've never been to Mexico. They don't know anybody in Mexico. They don't have any family in Mexico. They came here from Spain 500 years ago, and their family's been here ever since then. So the Catholicism, again, is so deep. Now, I will say that even though Catholicism has all of its perversions, I think it's better to be able to go in a grocery store and see a community at which there is liberty to put up crosses, albeit Pepsi boxes, but all sorts of weirdness in there, isn't there? But to see the cross where the community is saying, Christ did something for us. Now, I think that we can use that as a starting ground. It's not been an easy starting ground because they get so locked into it that they refuse to think beyond their Catholicism. But the question is, would it be an easier starting ground if they didn't even know about that? See, we don't have that to work on, at least in our community and for the most part in our society, except that I would say there's more possibility of making some forward movement correctly theologically with the Hispanics and with the Native Americans than there is with the hippie atheist. So there's an openness to the things of Jesus. So is there any way God used the perversion of the gospel by the Roman Catholic Church for his purposes? At least the message spread to Jesus Christ. And so I'll give the Catholics that. They did indeed spread their message. Now, there's more to the history also. I don't know how this worked, but they converted them at gunpoint. Convert or die. They used the Native Americans as slaves to build churches. Look up the Taos Pueblo and look up the Catholic church there. It was built by slaves, torn down in rebellion. Built, torn down. Built, torn down. But somehow, through all of that, now the center of their community is a different Catholic church that they built and they're very proud of and have all sorts of things that go on there in all that. So, again, take it for what it's worth. At least they do know about Jesus. So we're one step ahead. Now, likewise, the partial and crippled Reformation is what Scott called it. Any value or benefit there? Yeah, I think so. I think most of us come out of some benefit of the Protestant Reformation. That most of us in our audience here don't have a Roman Catholic background. There are some of us who do, Greg, for example, and some others that have a Roman Catholic background. But most converted to right dividing. Their family back there converted out of some kind of Protestant movement rather than some kind of Catholic movement. Again, it starts you down the path. Can we call it a good slippery slope? Is there such a good thing is there such a thing as a good slippery slope? So Catholicism gets the name of Christ out there. Protestantism gets closer in expressing salvation. And then there were some people, so you had the Catholics needed reformed and the reformers reformed them. Then you've got some people who reformed the reformers. They kept reforming. They were ever reforming, as the book is called. And so I do think there's some good in taking a step in the right direction. You remember a few months ago, there was some talk, and still is from time to time, about Donald Trump's peace plan. And basically, my position is taking a step in the right direction is better than staying in the status quo, which is the wrong spot. So I would rather see some progress than have an all or nothing kind of attitude. That's what I'm going to do with that. Now, I am sure that some might, I don't know, even condemn me for the manner in which I answered that question, because some are very black and white thinkers and can't get beyond the perversions of the Roman Catholic Church. And I really do appreciate that. But the question was, is there anything good? So I answered the question. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, Greg says, looks like they were shrink wrapped. He's talking about the crosses. Somehow those crosses are holding together there at that Pepsi. I would have been more impressed had it been Coke, because I'm not a Pepsi drinker. But anyway, somebody went to work on it, and it is in that sense amazing. Okay, let me tell you. By the way, I'm not sure that the graphic is up, but it is Wednesday, right? And so with Wednesday, that brings us to our midweek special. And here you go. See if I can bring that graphic up big. There we go. There's a Wednesday special. Now, this was a good one. 20% off all books. If we sell it, it's 20% off this week. And so you just have to use coupon code Wednesday. Don't forget that. So fill up your cart. Got $1,200, right? Fill up your cart and use coupon code Wednesday. Save 20% on whatever we sell. So you've been interested in picking up something that's on there. This is a good week to do it. Normally we just have one book, and sometimes often that book is 30% off, but this is 20% off store-wide, which means there's a few things I'm going to lose money on because I don't even have a 20% markup, but I'm not going to tell you what those are because you would go and order that instead of the things I can make money on. Anyway, good coupon. Remember, coupon code Wednesday, and you'll be able to use that all week at Dispensational Publishing, and appreciate that. Okay, let's see here. Snowy Weston, Wisconsin. Is spring ever going to come? It snowed here Monday, and then it was really cold yesterday. Cold and windy and not a nice day at all. We don't have very many days that are the kind of days you just don't want to go outside here. Even when it's cold here, I very rarely wear a jacket. I'll wear a long sleeve shirt, maybe a sweater. And sometimes I'll have a jacket just left in the car somewhere. But yesterday was one of those like, man, you got to have a jacket and you got to go inside because of the wind. So is spring ever going to come? I don't know. When I lived in Texas, spring was my favorite time of year. It lasted 2 days and it was beautiful. And then it became hot. But spring was, it was pretty, flowers, birds singing, all that kind of stuff, like spring is, pictured in the books. I would have to say that here in Taos, New Mexico, spring is my least favorite season for a number of reasons. It is muddy. All the snow melts one drop at a time. Drip, drip, drip. Makes everything muddy. the snow is either old or melted, so it's not pretty, and what's there's got, red dirt and all that kind of stuff all over it. It gets windy. We don't have much wind other times of the year. Our flowers and whatnot are just starting to come on. They're later than most of the year, and up here in the mountain where I am, this morning at Studio B, nothing yet. It's way too cold for that. I think it was, I don't know, probably in the teens last night. And it just is it has a hard time getting here. Now, summer is glorious. 75 degrees in the daytime, 50 degrees at night. Just beautiful. If it's too hot in the sun, move into the shade. It's 15 degrees warmer in the shade because we don't have humidity. Yeah. And fall is so beautiful with the aspens changing, the brightness. It just snaps at you every day you look at it. And winter is amazingly beautiful. Another day of fresh snow, and you see a bird out there in the snow, but our skies are almost always blue, and the snow, the white snow against the blue sky and the pine trees. It's beautiful. And then there's spring. But there it is. Okay, let me see here what we've got on there. Scott says we need to use PayPal. And let's see, Nico, the PayPal salesman who called me yesterday, would be very happy to. Did he call you too and ask you to put that on there? Because he wants to talk to me. We'll see about all of that. Okay. Anything else we've got on here? Let me check, make sure that I've got what you have. Is there anything, this is from David, is there anything to this microchip implant stuff, as I just had a friend send me a video on the objective? Maybe. I don't think it's going to happen yet. But have you noticed that the conspiracy theorists end up being right like 10 or 15 years later? And I think that we want to be careful and watch out for this microchip stuff. Now, can I even go beyond that? I think it would give me, even if I didn't have concerns about a one world government or Big Brother, in which case you'd call me dumb, but even if I didn't, it would give me the EBGBs to have a microchip implanted within me. I'm thinking that's plastic and electronics, and my blood's running over it, and it's picking up stuff, and it's disintegrating or whatever. I don't think I want that in me. So I think that the public is not necessarily ready for that. Now, I say that, there's a lot of people with an artificial knee and an artificial valve and an artificial heart pumper thing, all those kind of things. So maybe we've gotten used to that, but I don't know. This electronic thing, it just doesn't seem to sound like something that the average person is going to say, yeah, put this in me. That's a good idea. But down the road again, I think we lose that fear of doing that. But even more so, I think that the manufacturers recognize that this is a problem. We don't want an artificial thing put within us. So how can they accomplish the same thing without even having a microchip? Can they do it through, this is a little beyond my pay grade here when it comes to electronics, but can they do it through a vaccine which actually has some kind of, not a microchip, but some kind of thing that just goes through your body, maybe even reproduces itself, that leaves a tracking ability within you? I don't know if you can do that, but I think we got pretty smart scientists out there that work to figure all this stuff out. So again, the question is there any validity to it? I think at this point it's a little more conspiracy theory, but again, the conspiracy theories seem to jump out and become reality. So I think it's something that we ought to keep our ear to the ground. Even this thing right here, the work that they're doing on following us, I think is frightening. And if it's not that, it's our computer. If it's not our computer, it's our car. Very difficult to. I was talking to a friend the other day about this surveillance, and saying, well, I wonder if it's time to go back to a landline or something and ditch the phone and quit doing that. His comment was, if they're going to have surveillance on me, they're going to be terribly bored. There's a lot of truth to that. What are they going to watch me go get a hamburger for lunch? But the way things are going, it's now illegal to go get a hamburger for lunch. So do I want to make it easy for them? No, I don't. So I think we're more and more going to have to watch that. Now, again, let me say, I've been one that has not terribly worried. I've not been terribly concerned about it. Again, I've got a computer that has a Find Me feature on it. I've got a phone that, can send my location and things know where I am. And I go to Google and I, say, find a Whataburger near me. And it knows where I am and is able to find it. It, can pop up advertisements at the place I am, all those kind of things. And I've not terribly been worried about it. I think it's time to start saying it is going to be abused, and it really is going to be time that we're going to have to begin worrying about it. 1984, the book was science fiction, right? Right? Remember that science fiction book? And yet, so much of it is here and being used. Okay, I want to jump over to Facebook. See if I've missed questions that you may have. Here's one from Scott. I was asked by someone about Philippians 1:1 in regard to saints. Who is the book written to? Is it just saints or Gentiles also? You got into one of my favorite discussions. How about that? Philippians chapter 1, verse 1. Now, my friends who are saints, that is, they disagree with me on this particular issue. They will put it at all of these letters, they'll put as just, it's one group of people, saints who are also, in this case, bishops and deacons, as we'll look at. So all one group of people. And yet they also claim to take the word literally, the printed word literally, and for the most part, they use the word "and" to mean what the word "and" means. But I think they got a little bit of mental block on some of this. Of course, my friend St. Brian Ross is going to be on the program next Tuesday, a week from yesterday. He's going to be the guest on Ask the Theologian, so we can talk about that a little bit. I'm sure it'll come up as he and I were talking on the phone. He said, you know what's going to come up? I said, yes, St. Brian, I know. So we'll talk about that. And I'm good friends with some people who think they're saints. And I can deal with that. They have a right to be wrong every now and then. But let's go to Philippians chapter 1, verse 1. Paul and Timotheus, who's one person, right? It's just one. He goes by Paul and Timotheus. Or is it Paul and Timotheus? Paul and Timotheus, the servants of Jesus Christ, to all the saints in Christ Jesus which are at Philippi, with the bishops and deacons who clearly are not very saintly. Have you heard the way they talk? Now, that is the saints with. Soon is the word. With, the word soon implies in and of itself that you've got to have two things. You can have this mug with this mug, but you can't have this with this. The word doesn't work that way. I'd like to give you this along with this. Oh, and also I'll give you this. And would you like this? And this with this too. And with this. By the way, there is a mug available on Dispensational Publishing, and it comes with two. And you can pick which ones. So it looks to me like, again, if you're taking grammatically, historically, contextually, all those kind of things that we want to do, what do we have? We have Paul and Timothy, two saints with saints. Saints with saints. That's saints with saints. Saints with bishops who are also deacons. Now, right there in that verse, look at it. Bishops and deacons. Paul and Timotheus, two saints with bishops and deacons. I think there that we can say he is writing to the church at Philippi, and this is, of course, up in Macedonia in Greece. And he has a core group of people there who are a part of the Jewish nation, and they are therefore a part of receiving the kingdom offer. And he has also got some people who are not Jews, and they are not part of the kingdom offer. And specifically, he is writing to the bishops and the deacons of that group of people in what we would term today as a church. So I would speculate then, and it's been years since I've done a study verse by verse through Philippians. We'll get to that one someday too. But I would speculate then, as we go through the book of Philippians, we're going to find that there are some things in the letter to the Philippians that are wholly related to saints alone. That is, to people being offered the kingdom. Those who are called to be holy, that is the Jewish people. And we're going to find some things that are wholly related to them. And we're going to find other things then that are related to the bishops and the deacons. So I think the answer there to the issue is that it's two groups of people. Thanks for that question there. And looks like we may have had a challenge on our Facebook feed. It might have just cut off there, but nonetheless, I don't know if we didn't put an extra quarter in the machine or what it was. Okay, I think at 11 o'clock here, I think I got all your questions. I am flying. No, here's another one. I'm flying solo here today, so sometimes I miss some questions. Here's one from Mike on YouTube. How do we help get common sense, common courtesy back to our nation? Seriously. I let me make an assumption for the question and question the assumptions. Let's assume, for the sake of the question, that civilization is going to go on for the rest of our lives and our children's and grandchildren's lives. So let's put off the rapture. I don't want to do that, but for the sake of our question, let's put it off. So then, therefore, let's give ourselves 150, another 200 years out there. In the long term, what I see in world history is it does come back to decency and common sense eventually. You take the Soviet Union, for example. I think even under the Tsar, before the Bolsheviks, that the Soviet Union was a place that the Tsar wasn't the world's best leader, but the Tsar had a Russia in which some people were doing very well, some people were getting very rich, and people were living lives without being killed by the millions. Then the Bolsheviks come in with this Bernie Sanders idea, we're going to build utopia. And utopia ended up being everybody is going to be poor and a lot of people are going to be dead. And that lasted for what, 70 years? And eventually, even that, it comes and it's going to collapse. You can only abuse people for a generation or two. And then somebody is going to wise up and they're going to turn. That has kind of been the history of the world. Let's go into our own nation. Let's say the 1910s, 110 years ago. There was actually a huge push toward socialism in the United States then. It was carried out mostly in unions. In the labor union movement that started in the early 1900s, and of course was huge in the teens and the 20s, growing ever more, and a lot of communists around there. The Communist Party in America was pretty strong then. Of course, the Bolsheviks were fairly new then. When was their the Bolshevik Revolution? Was that 1914? I'm going vaguely memory here. So there was a lot of that in the United States as well. Workers of the World Unite. And I think, by the way, that caused the Great Depression because there was such a rise in labor movements that when the Great Depression came, or when the financial collapse began to come, then there was no ability of a business to lay off one person or two people, or trim their staff by 10%. Because now they were all in this labor unions, and it was, Workers of the World Unite. And they united, and were all shut down. They just closed the factory. The management could not say, we got to lower salaries, we've got to lower hours, we've got to let 10% of you go, and we're going to let the newest go, or the oldest go, or the slowest go, or whatever it was criteria. They couldn't do that anymore. So therefore, then all of a sudden, you had huge waves of people instantly, all at once, becoming unemployed. And that, I think, wasn't necessarily the cause of the financial collapse, but it was the cause of a 10-year Great Depression. Now, back to common sense here. I think that what you have here is that eventually, it took a war, but eventually the world came back in the 40s and the 50s into some sanity. The 60s were times that were kind of insane. But the 80s were pretty decent. I'm a child of the 80s, so in terms of my growing up years, so of course I'll call them decent. So there's this kind of ebb and flow. So I give that really with a little bit of a positive sense to say that if the Lord delays his return long enough, there will come back someday some common sense and some common courtesy. My sense is, and a number of people will disagree with me on this, but my sense is that, Michael, I want to talk about your peppermint too. Sorry, I'm having a hard time catching all that. My sense is that most people are pretty decent. Facebook and Twitter will convince you they're absolutely horrible. But when I get out, don't tell the governor. But, if I go to a store or I meet somebody, on the sidewalk and, move across the street because we can't be 6 foot, for the most part, they tip their hat and stop to talk a while. And are friendly. So I think on an individual level, we're okay. You go to the park, there's nice people there. You know, there's a nice family over there, here, there. That's in the old world. But it used to be. There were nice people there. And so I think that's a good thing. I think that eventually, again, it does come back. Mike also said, and having a hard time finding that comment again, something about peppermint. And Stephen, I see, has a question, and Tony has a question. Boy, I got all these questions that I have missed there. He says, you need pure peppermint. You could order from my wife's web, get it sent to your house, will really help with your reindeer nose. So that's actually son, I think. But what caught my attention on that, my daughter had been given one of these, is it a diffuser that it kind of spits, not really spits, it's some freaky kind of thing that wet fog comes out of it, and a little thing of peppermint. And you put some water and a little peppermint oil in it. And she said to me, she gave it to us at Christmas. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, because she said, somebody gave it to me, but every time I'm around one of those, my nose starts running, my eyes start burning. I can't stand it. And I said, oh, yeah, we'll take it. And I've been using it mainly because I kind of like the smell when you go in. So the other day I cooked some hamburgers at the house and it was cold. So I cooked them inside, kind of stunk the house up. You know how all that goes. And so yesterday I put in some peppermint and turned that thing on. And guess what? Oh, my eyes were burning. My nose was running. I took the Sudafed, everything else, thinking, what in the world am I allergic to? And finally, I figured that's the only thing that's changed. Nothing's blooming outside. It's too cold. So I had to turn off the pure pepper. I don't know if I overdid it on peppermint or what, but I think I overdosed on peppermint there. Sorry, I'm going to keep you over time because I just found some more questions. Gary, is there any scriptures that say Peter was ever in Rome? No, they're not. I question whether Peter was ever in Rome. I think that's a Roman Catholic, obviously, invention. Peter, he could have gone to Rome. I don't see him spending much time there. He was an apostle to the Jewish people. There were Jewish people in Rome. That's what the book of Romans is writing to some of them, so explaining to them what is happening. But I don't see anything of Peter in Rome. Everything there is pure speculation, as I recall. So I don't think so. Rick says, why did Peter preach a nationalist salvation in Acts 10:35 to Cornelius in his house? What did the Gentiles believe in verse 45? Was this a kingdom incident or a transitional grace message? I think it was a kingdom incident. Now, again, a lot of individuals probably would disagree with me, but let's go to Acts chapter 10, verse 35. And here it says, in every nation, he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. Now, notice there's nothing about belief in there. It is fear him and work righteousness. Now, Peter was given instructions to start in Jerusalem and then Judea and Samaria and to the remotest parts of the earth. When he was given that instruction, it was with the kingdom message. You take this kingdom gospel to the remotest parts of the earth. Read in the Hebrew scriptures or in the even in the Gospels, and you see that there was an aspect of the kingdom that was applicable to all nations. There was the truth that all nations were going to have their own opportunity to come in. So Peter is preaching to the nations here, but he's not preaching a grace message. Again, look at verse 35. In every nation, he that feareth him and worketh righteousness. If I preached that, you would call me a heretic. You'd call it works-based. I want you to know, people out there, wherever you are across America and around the world, that if you fear God and work righteousness. Now, that goes to the Revelation 14, I believe it is. The angel proclaiming the everlasting gospel. It's very close to this. Fear God, honor him. Fear God, work righteousness, if I can paraphrase all that. That everlasting gospel is not the grace gospel, which was hidden in the past and will be removed in the future. Now, with that, what did they believe in verse 45? As you go down to verse 45, they of the circumcision which believed were astonished, and as many as came with Peter, because that on the Gentiles also was poured out the gift of the Holy Ghost. Now, the gift of the Holy Ghost is not a gift that was offered to or promised to the church. I think the church certainly does have the Spirit and being sealed with the Spirit, for example. But that was an Old Testament prophecy of the giving of the Holy Ghost. And you say, if you reject it as an Old Testament prophecy, you still it was a Jesus prophecy prior to the day of Pentecost. Therefore, it can't have anything to do with the church. And the Holy Ghost and the other kingdom promises were offered. So what did they believe? I think they believed the only thing that Peter taught in Acts chapter 10, and that very much was a kingdom gospel. Another question, Tony, I know this has been asked before, but I can't find the answer. How do I get color coding on my Greek in Logos? He's talking about right in the middle with the Newberry interlinear. And I believe, let me see if I can get us there in a decent amount of time. If you go to Faith Life, which is the parent company of Logos, let's see, the problem is you have to remember how to log in there. And let's just see if I remember how to log in to Faith Life. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. I'm going to try. Nope, that didn't do it. So, Tony, you have to go to your Logos Faith Life. Maybe if I try to get there through Logos, it will get me there. Nope, that didn't do that either. So go to Faith Life. Somehow you get there. And then I'm going to find out. We have a wonderful lady, Tara. I'm not sure she's on today. She's the whiz at it. She knows how to get you in. But in Logos, you have to go to the Randy White Ministries group, and you have to request to be a member. Once you are a member, you go to the documents page. I wish I could show you on this, but I got to figure out how to log in first. So go to your Logos, look for Randy White Ministries group. Make sure you're a member and not a guest or anything else. You got to be a member, and we can make you that. If you're not that, just Randy at randywhiteministries.org, and let us know what your Faith Life Logos email is. And we'll set you up as a member. Then go to documents, and then there is one for the Newberry interlinear color coding. You subscribe to that. You may have to wait a few minutes, refresh your screen, and it'll download in, is the way you do that. It is a wonderful thing, and one of these days I'm going to get us all in there. Okay, I think this is the last question from today from Stephen. What are the Pauline Body of Christ principles which are not law but normative guidelines for walking in fellowship in this dispensation of grace? Some speak of the law of Christ, but what is that? love, Paul certainly does talk about walking in love, walking in the Spirit, not walking according to the flesh. I think that's going to be the main issue right there. I think that Paul does not at all want to come and create a new law in replacement of the old law. So I think when you really analyze it, you can almost come to say the scriptures, the Pauline epistles, do not give normative guidelines for walking in fellowship. They tell you to walk in fellowship. The Pauline epistles would say, don't walk in the flesh, walk in the Spirit. And that becomes the normative guideline is walk not in the flesh, but walk in the Spirit. So allow the Word of God rightly divided to be your guide and to carry it out. I was looking through, or showed just a hair of it last night in our Theological Insomniac, looking through an old baptism reflector from Tennessee in 1902. I was very interested to see there that somebody had written an article about how to be a good church member. And of course, you got to include giving in there. And this person actually said, 1902, they said the tithe is part of the old dispensation. In this dispensation in which we are, we give as a man purposeth in his heart. God loves a cheerful giver, so go out and be generous. So Paul didn't want to take a standard of the law and make it a standard of the church. He wanted to leave it up to the individual. So really kind of what Paul does is say, here is grace, look at it for a long time, and then act accordingly. And that's the normative guideline for a believer. I think, by the way, that when you do that, you live even better than when is according to the law. When we keep our eyes on grace and on the gift that has been given, it really does affect our living and our thinking and all of the blessings that we have there. Okay, I am out of time. But I'll be back tonight, 6 p.m., and we will have the Gospel of John. I'll be coming from the pulpit of Taos First Baptist Church tonight. And let me just remind you that if you go to dispensationalpublishing.com, if we publish the book, you'll get a free download instantly and 20% off all books. Just use coupon code Wednesday. Don't forget that part. And you will save. And that will be a blessing. So glad you were here with us today. It's been fun. I look forward to seeing you tonight as I study the Gospel of John this afternoon. And we will walk together in the Word tonight through that. And that, my friend, will be glorious. Can't wait to see you then. God bless you.